And I think that's where we see cost alone will not be the pure driving factor. It will also be image, environmental consciousness, and a smart approach. And that's where we see the world going.
Today I have on Michael Perschke, and he is the CEO of Quantron AG, and he was formerly the CEO of Automobili Pininfarina. Today we're going to be talking about hydrogen because they do a lot of that over there at Quantron. But before that, I just want to ask you to introduce yourself and talk about your position in the automotive industry.
Perfect. Yeah, Andrew, thanks for meeting for this podcast. And yeah, as you nicely said, I've been in the automotive trade for quite some while, but probably in the last 10 years, nearly exclusively in the new energy, zero emission sector of the automotive trade. I spent in total 13 years with the Daimler Group, at Daimler at Mitsubishi. Then I joined at some point the Volkswagen Group, ended up at Audi, and at Audi had multiple positions. One of them was also being the CEO of Audi in India. And my last job at Audi was basically launching the e-tron brands on the sales strategy side. So already first exposure to zero emissions still with a large OEM. And because I was totally convinced that the future is zero emission on all ends of the automotive spectrum, I wanted to have the ultimate challenge, and that's where I launched Automobili Pininfarina. So basically taking the Pininfarina design brand and making it an own manufacturer. And the development started with the Battista, which is now recently slowly getting handed over to first clients. Then in between, I was a little bit on the investment side, worked for a family holding, which was solely and exclusively invested also in zero emission, including brands like Rimac and Formula E. And since September last year, I'm the CEO in Quantron, and I already entered Quantron in March also as an investor. And for people who don't know Quantron so well, Quantron is probably the European version of players like an Arrival, like a Nikola, probably less like a Kanu, but we are a clear company with pure zero emission. While we have multiple legs we're standing on. One is we retrofit existing vehicles which have still an ICE drivetrain, mainly diesel, and we convert them to electric. This is where we started in the DACH region, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. And when I came in as an investor and later as a CEO, I said, okay, we're going to industrialize the refitment business, which in the US is known from companies like XL Fleet and Lightning and partially Proterra. And we're going to become also our own manufacturer because we understand the Quantron inside. We understand how an electric and a hydrogen drivetrain works. And we said we want to build our own vehicles. So from the Quantron inside, also slowly looking at interesting market opportunities and niches where we can also have our own footprint. And finally, our third step will be that we will also have vested interest in hydrogen production and distribution. Because we believe that while for the last mile delivery up to 7.5 ton and up to 200, 250 kilometers or miles, electric vehicles are absolutely the best choice. Taking electricity from the grid, having an 80 to 100 kilowatt hours battery and going 100, 150, 200 kilometers or miles in inner cities and delivering zero emission to the clients. Especially, of course, under the precondition that the energy you fuel is green energy, so made from solar, from wind, from water, or from whatsoever. However, we analyzed very deeply, and that's where Quantron comes now in the next step, that for long distance, especially heavy trucking, we talk in US 49-ton trucks or in Europe 44-ton trucks, where you have a target range of 500, 600, 700, up to 1,000 kilometers, we believe electric vehicles can't do the job. Yeah, it's sheerly the amount of batteries you need to put on board. It's the power you need in the grid. And I mean, Andrew, you know a little bit California. Imagine you have like 100, 150 semi trucks going on the grid and wanting to hypercharge at the same time. You have a lot of places in the world where the grid just doesn't have the power. You can do some buffering, but it's still a challenge. And we see that beyond 200, 250 kilometers on a heavy truck, there's a break even between the weight of a hydrogen system against an electric system. And if you go more than 250 kilometers, the hydrogen system is much less weight than the electric system, especially due to the batteries. And taking into account that batteries are also rare minerals with cobalt, lithium, nickel, we don't have unlimited resources, especially the special nickel ingredients is a limited resource worldwide. So when I came on board, the strategy for the future is for Quantron, we want to become the European leader in zero emission transportation solutions. That means from last mile to long distance, and from existing vehicles, helping fleet operators, whether it's an Amazon, a FedEx, or an IKEA, convert part of their fleet to zero emission, because the vehicles might still be fairly new and it's not sustainable to throw them away, but it might be sustainable to convert the drivetrain, to building our own vehicles. And we will start with a bus on 16th of February. So this is where Quantron is. We are not a startup, we are a spin-off. We have a family group behind who exists since 39 years. So we are in the 5th generation ownership of the family. And then at some point there was a spin-off of the business leading to Quantron, focusing exclusively only on zero emission transportation.
So that's very interesting. So before we get to the whole hydrogen part, you mentioned retrofitting ICE vehicles. So how does that process go about? I'm assuming you have a facility, you bring in the ICE vehicles. So how does that process, what are the specifics of it?
Yeah, I can send you a video if you can integrate in the podcast. I don't know, as a background, it might be interesting to look at. So people don't only have to look at our two faces, but have a little bit of a background material. So basically we have a huge factory close to Augsburg, which is not far away from Munich here in Germany. We bring in the vehicles. The first step is the end diesel diesel end dieselization. So we take out the diesel drivetrain, we take out the gearbox, we take out the exhaust systems and everything which is around the diesel drivetrain. Then we integrate a battery system, the inverters, the motors, and integrate that into the existing vehicle. Of course, we use still the cardan system. We use the electrics of the vehicle. We use, of course, the cabin chassis architecture. So basically we convert, we make it from ICE to electric. And why is that relevant? Well, there's segments in the market where today you don't have electric vehicles. So we have clients like IKEA, like food delivery companies and so on. And the ramp up of companies, even like Arrival or Rivian, are fairly slow. And they focus at 10, 12, 14 cubic meters of space to transport stuff. Our clients look at, and I don't know what it's in inch or in feet, you need to translate that, sorry for that. We look at 24 to 26 cubic meters of load. So it's not the weight, it's the volume. So if you're an IKEA or if you have food logistic, you don't have weight, but you have a lot of volume. So our clients want 150 to 200 kilometers range. They want a volume of around about 24 to 26 cubic meters, and they want a payload of 1 to 1.5 ton. There's actually no such vehicle available in the market. So we help them either converting existing vehicles who have that specification but are not available electric, or we take a new vehicle like an Iveco Daily or a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter or an MAN TGE or a Volkswagen Crafter, and we fit in our drivetrain so that our clients have actually the solution they need to fulfill their needs. And in Europe, you have a lot of cities which are slowly closing down to emission vehicles for inner city transport. Cities like Oslo, London, Madrid, Zurich, there are more in Amsterdam, there are more and more coming, and they're not allowing diesel delivery vehicles to go to the inner city. So if you are one of these companies I mentioned and you want to deliver to clients in the inner city, you have a need. But the manufacturers don't have the solution yet. And so that's where also clients come to us and say, look, we have this and this specification, can you help us? We have a fleet, they have a wrong drivetrain. So we want a part of our fleet to be retrofitted, and we have another part we would like to look at replacement. Can you help us? And the good thing is we are a one-stop shop solution provider. We don't necessarily have to only sell our own brand because we have a Quantron inside. And that allows us also to work with third-party basic cabin chassis trucks and convert them. And that makes us as a very trusted, neutral advisor to fleet companies rather than somebody who only wants to sell their own vehicles.
Interesting. So you mentioned the electric for city driving. Now, I'd like to know a little bit more about the hydrogen. So what's a company that's like, can you give me an example of a company interested in the hydrogen vehicle and long term? So what would the, just overall specifics of
There
that be?
are basically many companies interested in, because you have heard probably a little bit about the ESG rating, economic sustainable governance rating, which companies have to do from 2022 onwards, especially if you're listed. Larry Fink and others will ask you, if they invest in your company, where's your ESG rating? So how economic sustainable is your business model? So if companies assess their CO2 footprint, any company in the world who delivers something will realize that by far the largest part of their CO2 footprint is normally not the production, unless you're Shell and you're producing oil. It is basically how you transport products to your factory, like supply, and how you take them out of your factory and deliver it to clients. If you look at companies like Amazon, if they're shipping stuff from China in container ships with heavy oil, 40-foot container ships, this is a serious CO2 footprint. So the ESG rating puts a lot of pressure on companies and say, we need to do something. But the something is, it's limited. It's how quickly can you act? You cannot act quickly to go to a shipping line which transports thousands of containers, and some are yours, and say, hey, you need to move to zero emission. You need to convert your ship to green ammonia. So that is a very slow breakthrough. The other thing, also airlines. Airlines will also take quite a while until they can fly with zero emission balance sheet. So what remains is basically rail and trucks. So we see that any company who has a lot to transport on long distances and wants to go zero emission, they basically have that need, whether it's the FedEx ground long distance, whether it's UPS, whether it's Amazon, whether it's IKEA from their factories to the distribution centers, you name it. Go on the highway in the US and see which trucks you see on the road, which go from Southern Carolina all the way to New York, or all the way over to California, or down to Florida. And those brands you see on these roads, if they are listed, they have pain points, because their CEO and their CFO want to talk to investment funds and say, hey, we are sexy stock. And the investment fund will look at them and say, hey, your ESG rating is 25, you're orange to red. If you don't do something, we're going to delist your stock from our investment fund. And that's where Larry King from BlackRock has written a couple of letters to a lot of CEOs in the world and say, hey, guys, if you don't change, we're not going to invest in you. He said, decarbonization is the biggest opportunity of our lifetime. Decarbonize or die. So that's where our clients are. Clients who have a long distance, heavy goods transportation needs are the clients we're going to talk to convert them or help them to convert to hydrogen-based zero emission transportation solutions.
Mm-hmm. So with electric vehicles, especially in the cities, the cost savings are very apparent. But with hydrogen, still right now, especially in California, hydrogen's very expensive. And especially, I'll give you an example, the Toyota Mirai. Those things are around 60,000 when they came out. I forgot when, but like maybe 2018. And now dealerships are selling them for under 15,000 just because no one really wants one.
Just get rid of that. Yeah,
so
I think we're in the hydrogen economy probably where Elon Musk was 2010, 2012. We're 10, 15 years behind in the penetration of hydrogen. I personally believe having a passenger car on hydrogen is not needed. When you have a Lucid Air, or you have a battery company who converted a Tesla to the battery cells, I think on battery electric vehicles, we're soon going to see anything between 350 and 500 miles becoming the new standard. So if that's the range you drive and you can hyper fast charge, I think for a passenger car, that's okay. You have 80 to 100 kilowatt hours on board that takes you at a distance, and you don't have to radically change your driving habits anymore, which is very different to trucks. First of all, there is no long distance heavy truck launch today who can crack 400 to 500 miles on a single charge. We'll all expect what this Tesla Semi will really do. But I know of logistics companies, logistic providers who tested from Kenworth to Cascadia to Nikola, anything which is on the road today electric as a truck. And when on paper, these trucks claim to do 250, 300 miles, and you put them in California in hot climate conditions, full infotainment on, and they go from Los Angeles towards Lake Tahoe. The real range of these trucks is 80, 100, maybe 120 miles. And then if a grid doesn't give you the charging you expect, you can be on the charging pole for a couple of hours. This is a major change in what a logistic company needs. And this is where we see hydrogen. Yes, when you look and when you do an apple to oranges comparison, hydrogen today is more expensive than electric, 100%. The fuel cell is expensive. You still need some batteries, and hydrogen is expensive. And I know in California, we talk about 15 to 17 US dollars per kilo hydrogen. This is not efficient. We are in a venture where our target is to produce and sell hydrogen for prices of 6 to 8 US dollars per kilogram. So less than half. We also know that the hydrogen fuel cells will come down from 600, 700, 800 euro or dollars per kilowatt to probably 100 to 150 euro or dollars per kilowatt. Makes also a big difference. And if you want to really compare a diesel truck with a hydrogen truck, you should not compare 2021 to 2021. We need to be fair and compare late 23 or early 2024 when you will have really a bigger offering in the market. I can speak for Europe. I know US might follow. The price for diesel will go up for sure. How much we will see, but in Europe it's already going up. The price per ton CO2 will also for sure go up. In Europe, the midterm price is around 50 to 70 euro per ton of CO2. There are countries like Norway, which are already partially charging up to 700 euro per ton of CO2. So you will have tailwind factors for hydrogen. As I said, production will be cheaper. The cells will become cheaper. The pressure from the outside world will become cheaper. I would say, Andrew, you are part of generation Instagram, right? Instagram,
sure. Yeah.
Snapchat, Pinterest, but for sure Instagram. Now imagine, and I think you can remember back in the European Football Championships, if you watched it, Cristiano Ronaldo took the Coke bottle and put it away when he was holding a press conference. That event alone on one single day and one single action costed short-term Coke a market cap of 1 to 2 billion.
Wow.
So now imagine you as a generation Instagram, as a zero emission fanatic, you see that all your grocery, let's say from Walmart or Target, every morning comes with a diesel truck, and you smell them and you don't like them. There is a generation now where I diss this company. I'm not going to buy from them anymore. And not just me, I'm going to tell my parents, we're not going to go to that company anymore. They are polluting the environment. I want to buy for a company which is sustainable. Look at companies like Patagonia, for example. Yeah, a super sustainable company. They even repair stuff. They take it back. So they will also move to zero emission faster. We know IKEA has a very aggressive strategy to move to zero emission. We know there's a lot of pressure on companies like Amazon. We know that FedEx gets a lot of questions from their clients like Nike, Adidas, and the brands. Can you transport? And you have companies like Hobby who transport from McDonald's or Burger King. So a lot of companies out there were searching for solutions. And as you rightly said, last mile is electric. Long distance, we strongly believe, and we did lots of analysis based on green hydrogen. It is a huge impact for the world to reduce their CO2 footprint. And we need to compare 23, 24, the two means of transport of the three, ICE, electric, and hydrogen. And we believe for Europe, we can show the numbers. We will reach a break even in late 2023 under certain assumptions. If you count in also that the cost of capital will become more expensive if you don't apply zero emission strategies, if you cannot sustainably reduce your CO2 footprint, and if the consumer takes the extra verdict on you as a brand, you're in trouble. And the investors will delist you from a lot of investment funds who say our future strategy is sustainable investments. You are in orange or red when you count your ESG score. We're delisting you from most of our funds. And then CEOs, CFOs, and boards will say, look, guys, this is unacceptable. So we need to move. And we believe that we can scale hydrogen supply, green hydrogen supply together with our vehicles and trucks, also in the US, and we're working on 2 or 3 confidential projects, where we will talk to some of the companies I mentioned and many more and offer a plug-and-play solution.
So one question back to the hydrogen. You mentioned green hydrogen. So I'm assuming this is hydrogen created with 100% renewable electricity.
Yes, that, I mean, you can say, I think you can call it green when you have 80 or 85% green. You need to have a minimum threshold, and I think it's 80 to 85%. You can have still a little bit of other energy, but it should be solar, it should be wind, it can be wave tide, or it can be geothermic, or it can be splitting green ammonia and cracking green ammonia into hydrogen. So any of those sources where after you produce the hydrogen, you have the same or lower CO2 footprint than before. You can also crack methane, for example, and produce solid carbon and a green hydrogen. So there are multiple chemical processes which allow you to call it green hydrogen. I'm not personally a big fan of red hydrogen, which is what the French will do, basically hydrogen based on nuclear power. When you purely look at it from a CO2 footprint, it is still CO2 neutral. But of course, we should not forget that if you have nuclear power plants, you have to put the waste somewhere.
Mm-hmm. But I will argue, though, with nuclear that the nuclear waste is, they can bury it in the ground. And because at least here in America, a lot of it's nuclear, and the waste is, they keep them in like train containers and then bury them in the ground near the site. And then they just
sure. I mean, it will never go away. It will stay there, and it will be radioactive for 100, 150 years. So it's not, there's still an environmental price you pay. The question is, will it be a price which is moderate, reasonable, acceptable to the world, or is it unacceptable? The French are pretty clear on that. The Germans have a different view. In Europe, it's a big debate right now whether the new modern nuclear power plants are considered green from a CO2 footprint point of view. But yeah, probably it's a philosophical discussion. I could imagine that some of the company brands I named, they don't want to drive with red hydrogen. I think if they want to drive, they want to use green hydrogen. So I would say red hydrogen, probably not for the super conscious, ESG conscious application, but you can use the red hydrogen, for example, for steel production or other methodologies.
Fair enough. So I think one final question, though, with hydrogen. So with these trucks, what's the price looking like now when you compare it to, I assume most trucks are diesel. So compared to diesel trucks, what's the like price? I mean,
so the diesel trucks, new diesel trucks at 150 to 180,000 US dollars. I think a comparable electric truck is close to double, 60, 80, 100% more. A hydrogen truck without subsidies, without anything, will be more expensive initially than an electric truck, because you basically have two systems. Of course, he has much less battery, but the hydrogen systems, especially fuel cells, are also not cheap. But as I said, with the developments, we see that the hydrogen fuel cells become cheaper and some other tailwind factors. I don't see that a hydrogen truck will be as cheap as a diesel truck, for sure not. But then the good thing is, for example, California grants up to 100,000 USD subsidy if you replace a combustion engine truck with a clean energy truck. So we need to also compare before and after subsidies. The subsidies will not be there indefinite, but my philosophy for every part in the world I have seen, initially it starts with subsidies on zero emission and no penalties on ICE. Over time, the subsidies come down, but the penalties goes up. So I think like with any green transportation solution, you cannot look at the CapEx, means just the purchase price. You need to look at CapEx and OpEx in combination, and you need to apply a long-term strategy. So you need to look at a 6 to 8 years usage period. And then already today, the electric vehicles beat ICE vehicles by far, because after year 2 or 3, the maintenance cost, the wear and tear on mechanical parts and oils and clutches, the cost goes up exponentially. So a hydrogen truck is nearly as maintenance free as is an electric truck. We believe that you can run a hydrogen truck for 6 to 8 years before you have to replace the hydrogen fuel cells. So it's fair to do a 6 to 8 years TCO comparison to a diesel truck. And for Europe, we have the numbers very, very concrete. For US, we're just starting the sensitivity. But as I said, the transportation industry moves from an industry which was extremely purely cost conscious to an industry which becomes much more environmental responsible. And I think there are the brands I mentioned and many more are actually willing to pay more if they have guaranteed green solutions. And I mean, I don't know how it's in the US, but I know you have a similar development. If you imagine 10, 15 years back, and you would have told your parents that you pay for an organic tomato, the double or the triple of the price of an industrial tomato or lettuce or whatever, they would say you're crazy. Today, you have all the delicatessen and the vegetarian markets, which actually sell green products, organic produced at a significant higher price than industrial produced products with pesticides and so on. So we believe that there's also a generation growing up who say, look, for me, it's so important that I have a conscious CO2 footprint. I'm willing to buy from company A against company B because Target is green, Walmart isn't. I go to Target. And I'm willing to pay more because I get more and because I want to safeguard that planet even for my children. I don't know if you saw the movie Don't Look Up.
No, I haven't watched it yet.
You should watch it. It's a little bit of a that's a persiflage, a little bit of satiric movie. It doesn't talk about the environment catastrophic. It talks about the satellite hitting Earth, but it's basically a metaphor. And I think we're coming to a point where it's not just Greta Thunberg who's going on Friday for Future, but there's an entire generation like you, where even at college you will learn more about sustainability, circular economy. And I think that's somewhere between 23 and 25. I think the commercial transport space will also be targeted. That is not an option anymore, whether you go electric or hydrogen. It's just the choice is, do I go electric because my transportation needs as a brand or transport company can be fulfilled by electric trucks, or do I need also hydrogen solutions, including rails? Rails is also a very good application for hydrogen. And it's also heavy, it's long distance. And if you produce the hydrogen green, you can also fuel rail systems or ships. So yeah, Andrew, it's I think it's amazing, and thanks for your time and your interest. I think what we discussed also offline in our email communication, I think people these days become very, how to say, very absolute. You know, it's electric against hydrogen. It's only one can win or the other. It's 0-1. I think this was like the early days when we were watching and monitoring what Elon Musk did back in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, where I was still at an established old school OEM car manufacturer at Audi. And people always had all the arguments why Elon Musk is not going to make it, why he's going to go bankrupt, why the vehicles are crap, and the quality is not good. And then over time, electric won. And now I think electric is a given, especially for passenger cars. I think there's no car company out there anymore who's not doing proactive electric cars. I think we're in the same discussion, especially for heavy good transport, for hydrogen against electric. And I think that is the wrong perspective. They're not competing really, they're complementing each other. If you really want to take long distance transport to the next level and be zero emission, I think battery electric transport is not gonna deliver what transporters, brands do expect today. Yeah, and that's where we see hydrogen. If we can build a hydrogen truck for 49-ton US Class 8 truck, and we can give a transport company 600 kilometers of range and a refueling in 10 to 15 minutes. So basically you can do Miami, California, what is it, probably in 3 days, 2.5, 3 days, because the fueling is available, it's green hydrogen, the truck is available. It will be a little bit more expensive, but probably it will start to be registered first in California because we have the subsidies. And the brands ask for this kind of transportation solution because they want to deliver green services to the clients. Then I think hydrogen will have its market share. It will not take over the entire market. I think a passenger car, hydrogen doesn't really make sense because you get really good passenger cars with long range, like I said, Lucid Air or others, making the stunt you need to do. And if you really need to go from New York down to Miami in the shortest possible time on the planet and you don't care about your CO2 footprint, you can still take a gas guzzler. I think it's not en vogue anymore, but people are still doing it. So I think we need to be aware that more environmental consciousness will short term cost more money, but medium long term will be more efficient, and very long term will save our planet going beyond the 1.5 degrees global warming. And if we don't do that, it's a do or die, like the chairman of BlackRock said, decarbonize or die. It's the biggest opportunity of lifetime. So we strongly believe hydrogen has its applications. It has its use cases. Green hydrogen production costs are coming down. With reducing operating costs means cheaper hydrogen. Reducing capex means cheaper products. There's a break even foreseeable in 23, 24. And we believe there will be more penalties out there. And trucking companies, but specifically highly emotional and high price brands, will have a need to decarbonize and go green. And they want their vehicles also to be visible on the road and say, I'm Nike, I'm driving my trucks with green hydrogen produced by this and this. I'm a conscious company who wants to save the planet. And I think that's where we see cost alone will not be the pure driving factor. It will also be image, environmental consciousness, and a smart approach. And that's where we see the world going.
I agree. Some good finishing points. Thank you again for coming on, Michael.
Thank you.